Captain Daniel Hayes stood in the diplomatic chamber on the Zarthian flagship, watching the alien commander across the table. The room was sealed tight, with thick walls that could survive a direct missile hit. Everything about the Zarthians screamed power and control. The Zarthian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had weapons that could destroy planets. They had technology that made human ships look like children's toys. And they had made it very clear that humanity was not welcome in their territory. Daniel had been sent to negotiate. The human government hoped they could reach some kind of agreement without bloodshed. Trade routes, territorial boundaries, maybe even a non-aggression pact. But as Daniel sat across from Vextol, the Zarthian commander, he could see in those cold reptilian eyes that negotiation was not what the aliens had planned. Vextol was tall and thin, with scaled green skin and eyes that burned like yellow fire. He spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "You humans arrived in our space without permission," he said. "You built colonies on worlds that belong to us. You think you can simply take what you want?" Daniel remained calm. "We meant no disrespect, Commander. We simply did not know those worlds were claimed. Humanity has no desire for conflict. We want to coexist peacefully." Vextol's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. "Peaceful coexistence is only possible between equals, Captain. And you are not equal to us." Behind Daniel stood his team. Lieutenant Victoria Grant stood on his left. She had sharp eyes and steady hands. Sergeant Paul Murphy was next to her, a man who had been trained in 100 different combat situations. On Daniel's right was Lucas Freeman, the team's medic, a calm and precise soldier who could think clearly in any crisis. All four of them wore protective suits. The suits had filters and could protect against most known toxins. They had been warned that the Zarthians might try something. Daniel had made sure his team was ready. Vextol leaned back in his chair. He did not wear a suit. The Zarthians felt no need for protection in their own space. "I am going to show you something, Captain. Something that will teach your people respect." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen enough conflict in his life to know what was about to happen. But before he could move, alarms did not sound. There was no warning. There was just a hiss from the ventilation system. A yellowish gas began to pour into the chamber. It was thick and moved like liquid smoke. It filled the room quickly, covering everything in a sickly yellow haze. The smell hit them immediately. It was sharp and chemical, with an underlying sweetness that did not belong in any weapon. "This gas," Vextol said calmly, "will attack your nervous system. It will paralyze your muscles. You will die in approximately 90 seconds. And your people will know that resistance against the Zarthian Empire is pointless." Daniel's first instinct was to panic. His heart raced. He could feel his breath coming faster. But he had been trained to control fear. He had been trained to think clearly, even when his body screamed at him to run. He looked at his team. Victoria's jaw was tight. Paul had moved his hand toward his weapon, but there was nothing to shoot. Lucas was already checking the readings on his suit's sensor panel. Then Paul did something unexpected. He sniffed the air. Not a quick, nervous sniff. A deliberate sniff, as if he were testing wine or smelling flowers. His eyes opened slightly wider. "Is that peppermint?" Paul asked, thought the question hung in the yellow air like a physical thing. Vextol stopped speaking. The other Zarthian officers in the room made strange clicking sounds that might have been confusion or anger. "What did you say?" Vextol asked. "The gas," Paul said. His voice was steady. "It smells like peppermint, or something close to it, like mint candy." Daniel's mind worked fast. Paul was not crazy. Paul was not having some kind of breakdown. Paul was one of the best soldiers in the human military. If he said it smelled like peppermint, then it smelled like peppermint. And if he said that, then maybe there was a reason why the gas did not seem to be killing them. Daniel checked his suit's readings. His heart rate was elevated, but that was fear, not the gas. His breathing was fast but normal. The suit showed no signs of major chemical infiltration. The gas was there, but his body was not shutting down. "How are you doing this?" Vextol's voice was sharp now, confused, angry. "I do not know," Daniel said truthfully. "But my soldier is right. This smells like something my people have consumed thousands of times. In candy, in medicine, in tea." Lucas looked up from his sensor panel. "Captain, my vitals are stable. Minor respiratory irritation, but nothing serious. The gas is being filtered by my suit, but even so, my body is showing resistance. Very strong resistance." Victoria's eyes met Daniel's for a moment. He could see the understanding there. Whatever the Zarthians had expected to happen was not happening. The yellow gas continued to fill the room. It should have been killing them. Every Zarthian weapon database probably said that this gas was lethal to carbon-based life forms. The Zarthians had used it successfully for 3,000 years. It had never failed them before, but it was failing now. Paul stood straight. His hands were relaxed. He looked at the Zarthian commander with eyes that showed no fear. "Commander, if you want to talk about a treaty, we should probably open the windows. This smell is getting thick." Vextol stood up so quickly that his chair fell backward. His face showed something that might have been rage or might have been fear. Perhaps it was both. "End the gas," he shouted to his officers. "Now." The hiss from the ventilation system stopped. The yellow cloud began to clear. The Zarthians moved away from their table, speaking in quick, harsh clicks that Daniel could not understand. Daniel turned to look at his team. They were all alive. They were all standing. And they were all looking at the Zarthians with an expression that said something very simple. "You tried to kill us with your best weapon, and it did not work." The negotiation, Daniel realized, had just changed completely. The Zarthians had shown their hand, and it had failed. Now they would have to figure out what to do with a species that did not follow the rules of the galaxy they had written 3,000 years ago. The yellow gas had completely vanished now. The ventilation system pulled the last of it away into recycling chambers where it would be studied and analyzed. But the damage to Zarthian confidence had already been done. Vextol sat back down, but his movements were no longer smooth and controlled. There was tension in his body. His yellow eyes watched Daniel and his team with a new kind of attention. This was not the look of someone who knew exactly what would happen next. This was the look of someone whose plan had failed in front of witnesses. Daniel kept his voice steady and calm. "Commander, I think we should talk about what just happened here." "You should all be dead," Vextol said. The words came out flat, like a statement of fact rather than an emotion. "But we are not," Daniel replied. "Why do you think that is?" Lucas Freeman stepped forward slightly. His medic's mind was already working through the problem. "My suit readings show that your gas was designed as a neural disruptor. It attacks the nervous system of most oxygen-breathing species. The compound structure is effective against 97% of known carbon-based life forms." "Exactly," Vextol said, and now there was anger in his voice. "It is designed to be lethal to virtually all living things in this galaxy. Yet it did nothing to you." "Because Earth is different," Victoria Grant said. She had been studying alien biology as part of her intelligence training. Earth is a death world. Humans evolved there under constant pressure from the environment. The planet tried to kill us every single day. We developed resistance to countless toxins. Daniel nodded, picking up the thread of understanding. "Your weapon contains a compound that we have been exposed to for thousands of years. It is not alien to human biology. We have learned to handle it. We have learned to survive it. Vextol made a low clicking sound. It might have been a laugh or a growl. One species. One young species that has been in space for barely 200 years. And you are already proving to be immune to our most effective weapons. Not immune, Paul said quietly. His eyes had not left the Zarthian commander since the gas was released. Resistant. There is a difference. But yes, your weapon did not work. The chamber fell silent. The Zarthian officers who had been standing near their commander made quick clicking sounds. They moved back toward the table, but kept their distance from the humans. It was clear that the balance in this room had shifted. The humans were no longer the weaker species waiting to be shown the true power of their masters. Tell me about this death world of yours, Vextol said finally. Daniel considered whether to answer. Then he realized that honesty might serve him better than strategy. The Zarthians had already tried to kill his team. Everything else was negotiation. Earth orbits close to its sun, Daniel began. The planet has extreme weather. Hurricanes that can destroy mountains. Earthquakes that split the ground open. Temperatures that swing from freezing cold to burning heat. And life on Earth is not passive. Plants evolved poisons to keep from being eaten. Animals develop venom and toxins to hunt. The planet itself is hostile to anything that does not know how to survive it. Humans lived in this environment, Lucas added, and adapted to it. We developed strong immune systems. Our bodies learned to process chemicals that would kill most aliens instantly. We learned to push ourselves past pain. We learned to think clearly when we should be dying. Vextol listened to every word. His yellow eyes never blinked. When Daniel finished, the Zarthian commander was silent for a long moment. The databases say that humans are a primitive species, Vextol said. You have no better technology than other young civilizations. Your weapons are weaker than ours. Your ships are slower. You should be insignificant. We are not insignificant, Daniel said. We are simply different. And I suspect that difference is what your people never expected to encounter. The chamber doors opened. A Zarthian officer entered and made urgent clicking sounds to Vextol. The commander listened, his expression growing darker. Then he turned back to Daniel. Your fleet is matching our fleet's maneuvers in the upper atmosphere, Vextol said. They are not attacking, but they are also not backing down. They are following my orders, Daniel said. We came here in peace, but we came prepared to defend ourselves if necessary. You have just proven why that preparation was wise. Vextol stood up again. This time, his movements were slower, more controlled, but there was something dangerous in them. You understand what you have done here, Captain. You have shown us that we cannot simply eliminate you with a single attack. You have made your species a problem that requires thought instead of simply a problem that requires force. Yes, Daniel said simply. I understand. The Zarthian Empire does not negotiate with threats, Vextol said. But we do negotiate with species we cannot instantly crush. You have bought yourself and your people the right to sit at this table as equals. Not allies, not friends, but equals. Victoria and Paul exchanged a quick glance. This was more than they had hoped for when they entered this chamber. Then let us begin again, Daniel said. Let us discuss territory, trade, and coexistence. Yes, Vextol agreed. Let us discuss what humanity's presence in this galaxy will mean. Let us discuss what happens when a species from a death world learns to survive what was meant to destroy it. He sat back down at the table. His officers followed, but they kept their distance from the humans. There was fear in them now. Not the fear of the unknown, but the fear of people who had just discovered that their weapons did not work the way they thought they did on as the negotiation began in earnest. Daniel realized something important. Paul's simple question about Peppermint had changed everything. It had transformed humanity from a minor species to a wild card. The galaxy had just discovered that it could not predict human behavior. And that unpredictability was worth more than weapons or ships or any technology the Zarthians possessed. The negotiation table became a battlefield of words and careful statements. For 3 hours, Daniel and his team sat across from Vextol and his officers, discussing boundaries and agreements. But the real conversation was happening in the silence between words. The Zarthians were trying to understand how humanity had survived what should have killed them instantly. The humans, meanwhile, were trying to understand just how far they could push their new advantage. Vextol proposed a territorial agreement. Human space would be limited to a specific region of the outer galaxy. The Zarthian Empire would keep the central systems where most of the wealth and power was concentrated. It was a deal that would have been insulting to humanity just hours before. But now, with the knowledge that the Zarthians could not simply wipe them out with a single attack, the boundaries suddenly became more reasonable. "Your proposal limits human expansion," Daniel said, not accepting or rejecting it. "But it also guarantees our safety within these boundaries. This is a compromise that works for both sides." "There is something else," Victoria said quietly. She had been silent through most of the negotiation, but her sharp mind was working on the real problem. The Zarthians have been fighting the Kalar species for the past 50 years. The Kalar are also resistant to your neurotoxin. They are stronger physically, but they lack your technology. If both sides are immune to your best weapon, then the only thing separating you from defeat is your superior numbers and tactical skill. Vextol's expression did not change, but one of his officers made a sharp clicking sound, the click of recognition. "Or perhaps worry. Go on," Vextol said carefully. "Humanity could be a threat to the Zarthian Empire," Victoria continued. "But we could also be an asset. We could help you understand how to fight enemies that your weapons do not affect. In exchange, the Zarthian Empire could help humanity advance more quickly into space. Trade agreements, technology sharing, protection against other threats." Daniel understood what Victoria was doing. She was reframing the negotiation. They were no longer weak species begging for mercy. They were potential allies with something unique to offer. "An alliance?" Vextol asked. "A partnership," Daniel said. "Both sides benefit. Both sides are stronger together than apart." Vextol leaned back in his chair. Behind him, his officers were making rapid clicking sounds in conversation. The Zarthian commander was clearly in communication with them through some form of speech that humans could not fully understand. Finally, after several minutes, Vextol turned back to Daniel. "I will take this proposal to the Zarthian Council," Vextol said, "but I believe they will listen. Your survival of the gas attack has already spread through our fleet. Every Zarthian officer now knows that your species cannot be easily eliminated. Some of them are angry, but some are already thinking, as you are, about how we might use this fact to our advantage." "There is one more thing," Paul said. He had been quiet until now, still processing what had happened in this room. "Your neurotoxin. The gas. We survived it because it smells like something we know. But what if it was something we did not recognize? What if we had died? Would you have even understood why your weapon failed?" Vextol's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Paul said carefully, "that you did not know human biology well enough to design a weapon that would actually work against us. You assumed we were like other species you have fought. You assumed your weapon would work because it has worked for 3,000 years. But you did not actually understand your own weapon well enough to know why it was failing. It was a dangerous statement. It was the kind of thing that could start a war if taken wrong." But Paul said it calmly and without accusation. He was simply stating a fact. One of the Zarthian officers stood up, his body language showing rage. But Vextol raised his hand, and the officer sat back down immediately. "You speak truth," Vextol said quietly. "My people have ruled this galaxy for so long that we stopped learning. We believed our weapons would always work because they always had. We did not think deeply about why they worked. We simply used them. And now, for the first time in centuries, we have discovered a species that our best weapon cannot kill." "And you will adjust," Daniel said. "The Zarthian Empire is powerful because it is adaptable. You will study human biology. You will design new weapons that actually work against us. Or you will not, and you will accept that humanity is now a power in this galaxy that cannot be easily conquered." "Yes," Vextol said. "One way or another, the Zarthian Empire must change. Humanity has forced that change upon us." The negotiation continued for another 2 hours. They discussed trade routes and resource sharing. They discussed mutual defense agreements against other threats in the galaxy. They discussed technology exchange programs where humans and Zartians would work together to solve problems neither could solve alone. By the time the discussion ended, the basic outline of the Treaty of Accord had been sketched out. It was not a perfect agreement. Both sides had given up things they wanted to keep. But it was the beginning of something new. An actual partnership between two species that had nearly gone to war. As Daniel's team prepared to leave the chamber, Vextol stood and extended his hand in what the Zartians had learned was a human gesture of respect. Daniel clasped the alien's hand. The touch of scaled skin against his suit was strange, but it felt like a promise. "Your sergeant's question about Peppermint will be remembered," Vextol said. "It may seem like a small thing, but it changed everything. It made your people real to my people. Not as problems to be eliminated, but as equals to be considered." "Then we have succeeded in what we came here to do," Daniel said. "We came to negotiate. We leave with the beginning of a true relationship." As the team left the chamber and made their way back to their ship, Victoria whispered to Daniel, "Do you think the Zarthian Council will actually accept this treaty?" "I think they will," Daniel said, "because Paul showed them something they did not want to see. They thought they understood everything about war and weapons and power, but they did not understand us. And that uncertainty, more than any weapon, has made us truly dangerous." Commander Lisa Morrison stood on the observation deck of the human flagship, the Station Pathfinder. Below her stretched an expanse of stars and the Zarthian battle fleet that had been blocking their way forward for weeks. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced through possibilities and consequences. The message from Daniel Hayes had arrived 30 minutes ago. The gas attack, the survival, the negotiation, the treaty proposal, all of it documented in clear, simple terms that left no room for doubt or misunderstanding. Lisa Morrison had been in the military for 23 years. She had seen conflict and negotiation, war and peace. She had learned that the galaxy operated on a simple principle: strength. Those with strength took what they wanted. Those without strength took what was left behind. It was not right or wrong. It was simply the way things were. But Daniel's message suggested that everything was about to change. "Commander," her tactical officer, Captain Wayne Martinez, approached with a detailed report in his hands. "The Zarthian fleet has stopped its aggressive movements. They are holding position. No indication of attack." "They received Daniel's message," Lisa said. "They know what happened in that chamber. They are deciding what to do next. Should we prepare for combat?" Wayne asked. Lisa considered the question. In the old galaxy, the answer would be yes. You always prepared for combat because you never knew when it would come. But the old galaxy had just ended. The Zarthians had released their most lethal weapon on human soldiers, and those soldiers had walked away asking if the gas smelled like peppermint. "No," Lisa said. "We do not prepare for combat. We wait. We show confidence. We show that we are not afraid. 20 minutes later, a message came through the communication system. It was Vextol, broadcasting directly from his flagship to the human commander. Lisa watched as the Zarthian commander's face appeared on the screen. The reptilian features were unreadable, but something in the way he moved suggested a kind of respect that had not been there before. "Commander Morrison," Vextol's voice came through the speakers. "Your Captain Hayes and his team are remarkable. They have given the Zarthian Empire much to think about. The treaty they have proposed will be considered by the Zarthian Council. But first, I want you to know something. When you released humans into the galaxy, you released something that we did not expect to encounter. Your species is unexpected. Your survival is unexpected. Everything about you is unexpected." Lisa straightened. She understood what Vextol was saying. Unpredictability was power. "Thank you, Commander," Lisa responded. "Humanity is eager to show the galaxy what we can accomplish." "Yes," Vextol said. "I believe you will accomplish much. I have ordered my fleet to stand down. Your people may pass through our space without restriction. When Captain Hayes returns, we will finalize the treaty details." The transmission ended. Lisa allowed herself a moment of relief. But it was only a moment. Because now came the harder part. Now came the task of explaining to Earth's government that humanity had just moved from being a minor species to being a power. That the most dominant force in the galaxy was willing to negotiate with us. She turned to Wayne. "Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them that we have succeeded. Tell them that the Zarthian Empire is willing to sign a treaty with humanity. And tell them that Sergeant Paul Murphy asked if a deadly neurotoxin gas smelled like peppermint, and in doing so, he changed the future of human civilization." Wayne's eyes widened. "That is what turned the tide? A question about peppermint?" "No," Lisa said, understanding the deeper truth of what had happened. What turned the tide was discipline. Paul Murphy was so well trained, so accustomed to staying calm under pressure, that when he should have been panicking, he was instead observing. He was analyzing the situation with the part of his brain that was trained for survival. And what he observed was something the Zarthians never expected. He observed that their weapon was not as universal as they believed. Over the next week, as Daniel and his team prepared for their return to the Pathfinder, Lisa coordinated with Earth Command. The response was cautious optimism mixed with disbelief. The government wanted confirmation. They wanted proof. But ultimately, they accepted the reality. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not as conquerors, but as survivors. And that survival had value. When Daniel arrived back on the flagship, the crew treated him like a hero. But Daniel knew better. He was just a captain who had had the good fortune to work with soldiers like Paul Murphy. Soldiers who could think clearly when everything was telling them to panic. "The Zarthian Council has voted," Daniel told Lisa on the observation deck. The same place where Lisa had waited and wondered. "The treaty has been accepted. Within 1 month, human and Zarthian representatives will meet on neutral ground to sign the formal agreement. Humanity will have access to new trade routes. We will have protection agreements with the Zarthian Empire. We will have access to some of their technology in exchange for our own biological and medical knowledge." "This is remarkable," Lisa said. "How did you manage to turn a weapon attack into a partnership?" "I did not do it alone," Daniel said. "Paul Murphy did what he was trained to do. He kept his mind sharp when everything said he should lose it. Victoria Grant realized that we could be assets instead of threats. Lucas Freeman showed that human biology was different than the Zarthians expected. And you, Commander, you showed confidence in us when we were in danger. You did not panic. You did not attack. You waited. That is the real strength of humanity," Lisa said. looking out at the stars. Not our weapons or our technology. Not our numbers or our resources. Our strength is our ability to think clearly when we should be panicking. Our strength is our ability to turn disaster into opportunity. Daniel nodded. Behind them, stars wheeled through the darkness of space. Ahead of them, the galaxy was changing. Species that had thought humanity was insignificant were now reconsidering. The Kalar were already sending diplomatic messages. The Council of Independent Species was requesting meetings. Humanity's place in the galactic order had been permanently altered, and it had happened because a single soldier had asked if a deadly gas smelled like peppermint. 6 months after the Peppermint incident, as it was now called throughout human space, the Treaty of Accord was officially signed on the neutral station called Crossroads. Representatives from the Zarthian Empire, the Human Coalition, and several other interested species gathered to witness the moment that changed galactic politics forever. The signing ceremony was formal and precise. Both Commander Vextel and Admiral Sarah Mitchell, representing human interests, placed their hands on the document. The cameras recorded the moment. Within hours, the news spread to every corner of known space. Humanity was no longer a minor species to be ignored or controlled. Humanity was a recognized power with the right to negotiate its own future. But the real celebration happened on Earth in military academies across all human worlds. The Peppermint incident became mandatory study material. Young soldiers gathered in classrooms to hear the story of how Sergeant Paul Murphy had kept his mind clear during a chemical attack and in doing so had changed the course of human history. The lesson was simple but powerful. Under pressure, the trained mind can see what the panicked mind cannot. Paul Murphy himself became an instructor. He moved back to Earth and took a position training new soldiers at the Central Military Academy. He did not consider himself a hero. He had done what he was trained to do. He had remained calm. He had observed the situation. He had reported what he saw. Everything else had followed from that dot, but the young soldiers who trained under him saw something different. They saw a man who had faced certain death and had responded not with fear, but with clear thinking. They wanted to be like him. They wanted to understand how to keep their minds sharp when everything around them was chaos and danger. Paul worked with each class personally. He taught them meditation and breathing techniques. He taught them how to observe without judgment. He taught them that the difference between survival and death was often simply the ability to think clearly for just a few more seconds. When you face the impossible, Paul would tell the recruits, your mind will want to shut down. Your body will want to freeze or run or attack. These are natural responses. They have kept humans alive for millions of years. But in the modern world, in the military, these responses are not always the right ones. So you must train your mind to override these responses. You must train yourself to think, because thinking will save your life when everything else fails. Meanwhile, Daniel Hayes was promoted to commander of the Interspecies Relations Division. His job was to manage humanity's growing relationships with the alien species of the galaxy. The Kalar sent ambassadors. The Council of Independent Species granted humanity voting rights. The merchant guilds offered trade agreements. Everyone wanted to understand this species that had survived the Zarthians' deadliest weapon. Daniel spent his days in meetings and negotiations. But he never forgot the moment in the chamber when everything had changed. He never forgot the feeling of watching his soldiers face certain death and respond with calm professionalism instead of panic. Victoria Grant took command of the Diplomatic Security Forces, a new branch of the military dedicated to protecting human representatives in alien spaces. She was the perfect choice for the position. She had proven under fire that she could think clearly and act decisively in the most dangerous situations. Under her leadership, The security forces became known throughout the galaxy as the most reliable and skilled protectors available. Lucas Freeman became the head of the Medical Research Division. He began a comprehensive study of human biology and how it differed from other species. His research proved invaluable. Human doctors began working with alien species to develop new treatments for diseases that had been killing them for centuries. Human knowledge of toxins and poison resistance led to breakthroughs in medicine that benefited the entire galactic community. A year after the treaty was signed, the Zarthian Empire and the Human Coalition formed a formal alliance. Military experts from both species began sharing techniques and knowledge. Humans learned how to use advanced Zarthian technology. Zarthians learned how humans thought strategically in situations where their weapons did not work. The most important collaboration came when studying the peppermint gas itself. Zarthian scientists worked with human researchers to understand exactly why the gas had not been lethal. The answer was complex, but revealing. Human evolution on a harsh death world had given humanity a unique combination of genetic adaptations that made them resistant to a wide range of organic toxins. But more than that, the research showed something deeper. Humans had an unusual psychological trait. When faced with danger, humans could compartmentalize their fear and continue to function. Other species would have panicked. Other species would have frozen or fought mindlessly. Humans instead used fear as information. They used it to sharpen their attention and improve their thinking. This discovery led to new training protocols for Zarthian warriors. They began studying human military techniques. They learned meditation and breathing exercises from Paul Murphy's training programs. Within a few years, Zarthian soldiers became significantly more effective in situations where their weapons did not work. The Kalar also benefited from the alliance. They had been fighting the Zarthians for decades with no advantage. But when human military advisors began working with them, the Kalar learned human tactics and strategy. The conflict between the Zarthians and the Kalar shifted from a war to a series of limited engagements and negotiations. Within 2 years, the two species signed a peace treaty of their own. Humanity had not invaded the galaxy with weapons or conquest. Humanity had invaded the galaxy with something far more valuable: the ability to think clearly under pressure and to see solutions where others saw only problems. 3 years after the Peppermint incident, Commander Lisa Morrison stood again on the observation deck of the Pathfinder. But now the view had changed. The stars she saw were no longer territory to be conquered or avoided. They were territory to be explored and understood. Human colonies had expanded to 40 different worlds. Human trade routes connected dozens of species. The human navy had grown from a small defensive force to a respected galactic presence. And yet, Lisa knew none of it would have happened without that single moment in the diplomatic chamber. Without one soldier's decision to remain calm and observe instead of panic, a message came through the communication system. It was from Paul Murphy, broadcasting from Earth. He wanted to send a greeting to the Pathfinder crew. Lisa accepted the transmission. Paul's face appeared on the screen. He was older now, with gray in his hair and lines in his face that showed the weight of responsibility. But his eyes were the same, clear and sharp and present. "I wanted to tell everyone out there," Paul said directly to the camera, "that what happened in that chamber was not luck. It was training. It was discipline. Every single one of you has the ability to do what I did. You have the ability to keep your mind sharp when everything around you is falling apart. You have the ability to observe and think and act with clarity, even when you should be panicking. That is what it means to be human. That is what makes us valuable in this galaxy. Not our weapons, not our technology. Our value comes from our mind and our courage and our ability to stay calm when everything is telling us to be afraid." The transmission ended. Lisa looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, other humans were exploring and building and creating the future. The Peppermint incident had opened a door. Now it was up to all of humanity to walk through it and claim the place that was rightfully theirs in the galaxy. The story of a soldier who smelled peppermint in a deadly gas had become the story of a species that changed the course of galactic history, not through conquest or violence or superior weapons, but through the simple human ability to think clearly when thinking clearly seemed impossible. And that, Lisa thought, was worth more than all the weapons in the galaxy.